Good evening and welcome back to a brand new episode of Around the Pit. This is episode 6 of the new show that is all about talking Dota in sort of any capacity that we feel and bringing you opinions of experts, players, and otherwise on what's going on in the scene. So I'm excited today because we've got some great guests for you guys as we get this thing underway. And just so that you know, our first topic up as voted by the Twitch chat is going to be 6.86. But before we do that, let's introduce everyone, including our sponsors who make this show possible. That is, the show is made entirely on a computer built by ProBuilt Systems, powered by Asus, and of course, our supporters over at Razer for sending over all the equipment that we need to keep it running in terms of mice, keyboards, and all of that good stuff. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about who is here today. First, you got yours truly, Steve Pierce. You can find me at ToffeesTV over on the Twitter, and there's some other guys you can find there. The first guest we have with us right now on the left of the screen as you're watching is Skim. You know him as Skim Gaming. He was the writer for Gozu for a long time. Now he does freelance work kind of all over the place. We really don't know what he does other than sort of sit around and try to be relevant. How you doing today, Skim?
Hey, trying to stay relevant. That's actually a really good description of me. But I also am the lead community manager of Dota Buff, so there's that.
That's good. That's good stuff. All right, our second guest here tonight is a gentleman who is, I believe, still in New York, working on what it's like to be a student and try to play pro at the same time. It sounds like a lot to juggle. I'm excited to hear how it's going. It is Arif. How are you doing today, MSS?
I'm doing good. Hopefully Star Wars doesn't get spoiled for me tonight.
I can't control the soapboxes, and I hope that it doesn't happen too. So you can call him MSS, you can call him Arif, you can call, is it Arif? It's Arif, correct? Is that how you say it? Arif, MSS, or Mojo Storm Spirit, if you're into his World of Warcraft alter ego.
It's actually Mojo Storm Stout.
Mojo Storm Stout. Oh, my bad.
Come on, dude.
My bad. I'm sorry. All right. Last but not least, we have Mr. Ryan Gerardo, or Gorgon the Wonder Cow, if you will. He is joining us from, Lord knows, the guy moves so much, I'm not even sure what state he's in right now. Gorgon, though, big writer for, well, pretty much any website that you know and a big analyst of everything that is patch related. How are you doing tonight, Mr. Wonder Cow?
I'm doing well from lovely Ann Arbor, Michigan is the lucky city tonight.
Ann Arbor will never be the same. Well, it's going to be a good show, guys. If you haven't seen Around the Pit, it is a simple idea. What I do is I gather the greatest minds in Dota together. I give them topics, and just like Roche blesses us with the Aegis, I bless us with the time limit. You have 8 to 11 minutes to get your topic talked about. I do also assign points. You can see them in the top left corner of the box, and those points are, well, at my own discretion. I can take away, I can give plenty or drop you to 0 at any time based on whether or not it's funny, makes sense, or is just an interesting point. So that's kind of what we're battling for. The person with the most points at the end of the game gets a chance to return at their leisure because that Aegis brings them right back anytime they want to. You're going to hear a sound throughout the game. That's the sound you might hear. That means it's the end of a topic and time to move on. The last thing you need to know is that each player is afforded one soapbox during the game. They can call soapbox anytime that they want. At that point, they will get 1 minute on the clock when they can talk about anything that they want. And I told them, somebody asked me, can I do a Star Wars spoiler during my 1 minute? And you know what? If that's what you want to do, I can't stop you. So get yourselves ready, guys. Grab yourselves by your bootstraps because this should be a wild ride. All right, gentlemen, let's kick this thing off right. The fans want to hear about it. I want to hear about it. They want to talk about 6.86, the patch, as it is right now. We're going to open this one wide open. So I'm not going to give you a specific 6.86 to talk about. You can make the points over anything you want. We can talk about OP heroes. We can talk about new roles. Is the jungle returned? What do you think about 6.86 so far?
Okay, I'm just going to start off, and I just want to ask the other guys on the panel here. Do you guys agree that the games are just generally longer? Like, every game for me has been so far extremely long. I've had like already 3 to 4 games that went well over an hour. Actually, Gorgon, I'm not sure if you've even played patch yet, but
I just started playing the patch this weekend, and I've drilled out a lot of games, actually. I've been trying to catch up because I've been moving, right? So I've actually been having a lot of really quick games and a fair number of long games, but I've been finding that getting some quick push strategies together has been working out all right, especially Radiant side. Getting that out so that you don't actually have to rely on your own jungle, because the jungle changes are really dire advantageous. I don't know if anybody's noticed that or gone over that.
Radiant jungle is complete shit now.
Yeah, it's so when you think about the Radiant jungle now, the way that it is, if you just quickly think, right, if you're on the Dire side, how do you flow across the map? You flow from the top right to the bottom left. And if you're on the Radiant side, you flow across the map from the bottom left to the top right. If you go into the Dire jungle, you have to go up high ground, bottom left to top right, almost every set of stairs, which means the Dire has advantage on almost every set of stairs. The Radiant jungle is the opposite. So Dire still has advantage in the Radiant jungle for the high ground vision advantage over two camps. It's the two closest camps that they have to their base. And then in addition to that, they have fewer camps readily available to their mid lane. So that if they start to fall behind, it becomes really difficult to control your own territory.
I'm going to give you a point for that incredibly confusing dissertation. For 2 points, can either of you give us a layman's definition of what Gorgon just said about the jungle?
Well, the way I see it, or the way I see what he's trying to make, is basically it's very difficult to contest the Radiant jungle right now if you're Radiant, because unlike the Dire side, your hard camps are actually on the lower ground, whereas on the Dire side, yeah, it's on the high ground, so it's a lot safer to actually farm there passively. But on the Radiant side, you just need more vision actually to keep it safe nowadays.
Yeah.
Is it me or is there way more ways into the Radiant jungle in general? So
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm counting 6 major ways of entry, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maybe ways of entry into Dire. So yeah, there are more routes of access, but some of those require towers to drop, right?
Right. When we read the first patch notes initially, a lot of people said this is going to signal the return of the jungler to Dota. It seems like that's something that we could see more often. We have a new camp. We have some buffs to jungle heroes. Does the jungler role, has it returned maybe on the Dire side, or is it just still not really relevant in terms of the meta?
Well, I think what actually made the jungler, or what is like the biggest signal of junglers returning, is the fact that you can't clear stacks anymore, right? As easily. Like before, you wouldn't have a jungler because you wanted your jungle to be available to the mid hero or to the carry to just quickly clear them. You know, like SF raises them down, or even like a Windrunner with a power shot is pretty good to just clear camps. But nowadays, just because of the magic resistance added to the jungle creeps, I'm not going to say impossible, it's so annoying and so hard to do actually. So I think that's actually the biggest reason why we would see junglers back. And even on the Radiant side, honestly, it's still good to run a jungler.
I don't know, MSS, how do you feel about junglers? Because I have a different opinion on them.
I think junglers are pretty good, to be honest, especially like Chen.
Okay.
I've played around with Chen a lot, and I don't know, he feels very strong, in my opinion. Just like later on when you're pushing with those magic resist creeps, they actually do a lot more than you actually think they're doing. Like, you don't actually feel it, but they're doing so much. And like the magic resist creeps is a big reason why SF is barely picked anymore. Like raising, especially with the raise nerf too. Like it's so hard to clear these camps because you need like crap load of more mana.
You kind of have to do it in bursts now. You go back, you knock down half the camp, you go to your lane.
It's like you need a full mana and like a full bottle to do a camp now.
Right, and like an hour. You know, you just need some uncontested time in the jungle. So for junglers specifically, I feel that the pace of the game is really important for determining how a jungler fits into a team. And once again, the Radiant side doesn't have as good of control over their jungle. So if they don't get off to a pretty decent start in the mid game, what ends up happening, at least theoretically, right? And I don't have the data to support this because there haven't been enough games basically on the patch. But as far as I can tell, if you can't control your own jungle if you don't get off to a good start, and a jungler slows down your team's start for a better late portion of the mid game because you've got an extra core, what that means is that at least on the Radiant side, you're going to end up giving away a bunch of map control because you have a jungler. And one thing that I will add to that is that throughout patch history before 6.85, a lot of the heroes that win more on Dire side in professional Dota are junglers or pseudo junglers. We're talking like Enigma, Lifestealer, Bat Rider, those heroes, and that's only 25% of heroes about actually win more on Dire than on Radiant.
So Arif, let me ask you this: as you've been working on this Chen, have you been trying him on both sides, and did you find it's significantly easier on the Dire side to sort of get him up and running than the Radiant, or is it not really that big a difference?
I've actually only played him on Radiant so far,
Okay.
but it's like I've also tried Enigma too, and the way I played is like I only use the 2 camps that are near the mid lane,
Okay.
and at a certain timing, I go to the camp near the Ancient, and I actually gank their safe lane.
Right.
It works like 90% of the time because people don't expect that shit.
Mm.
like no one expects that, and yeah, that's just how I've been playing that jungle so far. But like in real games like that are not pubs, I've just do standard stuff like you move around the jungle, you pressure your safe lane, gank middle, and whatnot. It's like I don't think there's a big difference between Radiant and Dire, to be honest.
So one thing I will say for Dire Jungle is that you still have 3 camps near the lane. So as a Chen, obviously you can double stack and you can use the Wildkin to knock it down a little faster. That doesn't mean that you can't run a Chen really successfully on Radiant, but you do have that potential advantage on the Dire side. I don't know. I don't run Chen that much. That's all theory.
Actually, I haven't tried doing the Wildkin stacking.
Oh really? It's super
I don't know. Like I mean, I've done it before, like before 6.86, but I don't know like if the magic resist creeps affected.
Oh, that's right. You know what? I don't know.
Like I don't know if like it can.
How Tornado would.
How long it'll take anymore.
I need to test that. That's gonna be test tonight.
All right.
Like even without the stacking, you can still get a really fast level 6.
Yeah. In addition, the fact that all creeps are doing 10% more damage on towers now because of the damage type change of 686, and the fact that he now has that long slow from level 1. If you want it, you probably realistically level 2 or 3. It just makes him a better ganker. It makes him a better pusher. It makes him more reliable. I think Chen and Enchantress both got more buffs this patch than they were given credit for by general assessments.
Okay, I'll give you that. Okay, let's while we talk about buffs, then let's talk about heroes in this patch. Are there any hero before this patch came out? We heard screaming about Huskar as well as other heroes. Take him out of the game. Everybody's broken. The patch has been out for about a week and I think a week now, maybe a week and a half, and we're already hearing take him out of the game. They're broken. In your opinion, is anybody ridiculously overpowered? And if so, who?
Sure, all of Reddit will say Invoker.
Right, but it's Reddit, so take it with a grain of salt.
So, I mean, that hero is really strong, though.
He is, and he's really versatile, and that's part of his strength. I would by no means say that he's a bad hero right now, and he's definitely very popular and definitely very good. But I don't know that I'm ready to call him broken yet. What about you, Skim? You sound like you had something to say.
Yeah, I just think that, I mean, he was strong before already. Obviously, this change, if anything, only made him stronger, of course, but I don't think he's broken yet either. I mean, his laning stage is obviously very strong now, which was, his biggest weakness before.
Right.
But,
well, and I think a lot of folks are saying it's just the alacrity in the laning stage is too strong, and that just lets him springboard to the late game. Do you think his alacrity is too strong in the early game right now?
I think that it could use a nerf. I wouldn't argue with that.
It's actually insane.
Okay.
Yeah. So part of the deal with the alacrity is that you don't normally go, at least traditionally, historically, you don't go to an invoker for a bunch of right click early on. Like he has that, but you really go to him for his versatility. And it used to be a lot on the Forged Spirits as well for the potential to push and his potential global presence. And as the exhort style invoker has kind of fallen out of favor over the last 18 months or so, you're seeing more focus on this sort of right clicky style invoker. And with that focus being so strong, I think that the alacrity probably needs to not shine quite so much.
Fair. All right, any other thoughts on 6.86 before we move on from this topic, gentlemen? We got about a minute left on this.
I like that they didn't nerf Wind Ranger.
Yes, I do too. She's my girl.
I mean, I know that a lot of people have been crying, or not crying, but complaining in last patch. But I think that in general, Iceberg has done a good job of not over nerfing a lot of heroes. I mean, let's include. Yeah, there's definitely heroes that have been over nerfed for sure. Huskers, for example, one of them. But
I'm so
like,
glad he's out of the
yeah.
game, actually.
yeah, exactly. I mean, everybody's glad he's out of the game. So it's like techies, right? You don't really care that he's over nerfed. It's just like, just be gone.
I care. No, Wind Ranger is one of these heroes that in pro play, in pub play, it doesn't matter where you go, she didn't contribute net positive to her team. So I'm really glad that they didn't nerf her too much because of her popularity, because her effectiveness didn't warrant a nerf, right? She's popular, but not
Did she
effective.
have like a really bad win rate?
In competitive towards
yeah.
the end, towards the end. But that was mostly because Slaughter was also not that great anymore.
All
and
right.
also banned.
So that's all the time that we have to talk about 6.86. I'm sure it might come back up as we go through some of the other topics, but that is sort of what we're looking at right now. I do want to say this, and I'm going to take an extra minute for myself to ask you this. 6.86, the games you've watched, has a meta been established yet, or do you think it's still wide open?
I mean, no offense to the teams that have been playing it, but the best teams have yet to approach this patch in a competitive environment. So I think that the meta will still have to establish itself. It's not there yet.
It always, you see a lot of changes within the first 2 weeks of a patch, and then you see people kind of recede back toward what they're comfortable with and keeping a couple of those tricks. And then the meta starts to change again over the following month. So it's usually like 5 to 6 weeks after a patch before you really feel comfortable with the new patch meta, at least in my experience doing data analysis on patches.
That's fair. Arif, as somebody who's played pro Dota before, probably the only one out of all of us who was even close to being good at this game. How long do you think it takes most teams to sort of feel like they've got the meta or they figured out what they want to do with it?
I mean, of course it depends on the team, but probably like 2 to like 5 weeks.
Okay.
But
so
like right now, meta seems to be similar to 6.85, just like different heroes. It's just like you win lanes, you apply early aggression, take towers, try to snowball off it.
fair.
Maybe like I'm wondering if like the rise of AM is gonna come again, especially since the poker is very popular and stuff. Because like the way people play right now, it's always they try to like end the game pre 25 minutes, like around that time, and the way they draft, like with these Undyings and these like 5-man heroes, they usually lack a lot of catch. So maybe like split pushing will become good.
Do you think that the popularity of Bane would be an issue for an AM rise? Because he's, what, like the 4th most picked hero on this patch or something like that? Because it's a counter-ish, but it's not like a hard.
I mean, yeah, it's not like crazy counter.
Yeah.
Like, it's good, but I don't think
But it
it'll
is
be that good.
very prevalent. So yeah,
Bane's definitely a very good hero.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys indulging me. And now you did bring up something, so this will maybe motivate our next topic switch here. You said no offense to the teams that have already played, but we haven't necessarily seen the best teams get their hands on the meta. Here's my question for you. WCA just wrapped up. We're actually probably talk a lot about sort of the WCA and a couple of different aspects. Alliance doing very, very well. A lot of folks spamming out on Twitter and everywhere else. Alliance is back. I love the guys from Alliance, and I think that they are a great team. They're a staple in the Dota scene. Can we say Alliance is back based on their performance at WCA?
Probably not.
I mean, probably out.
It's just, you know, it's a new patch for like not even a day between patch release and the tournament. Like it was released on the morning of it, I think. And then there's like, it's like messy conditions, right? Not every team can play to their full potential just because, I mean, I'm not going to try to find excuses for certain teams, but if you don't have like optimal playing conditions, even if all the teams have the same conditions, it's still not favorable towards teams that may be used to different conditions. And then obviously it's not even like the best teams there, and Team Seeker was heavily underperforming. I don't know. I definitely think that's a good stepping stone for Alliance. It's like a huge milestone for them to get this out of the way, basically, to say, okay, guys, we actually won something after like over a year or something. It's a good confidence boost. But I wouldn't expect them to do like, top 8, top 6 at like the next major, for example. I would, if anything, I would say they're like on a good way to be back, but they're not back yet.
I honestly, I think it's almost insulting to the boys from Alliance to say that this tournament means they're bad. Like, they are former TI champions. They are world-class players, even though they haven't necessarily been a top world-class team for a while. And to imply that this is that pinnacle that they would reach with their skills hitting the right meter, um, I wouldn't go that far because I have more respect for those players than that. I think that they are all players that are still capable of doing top class performance, but I don't think that this demonstrates that necessarily.
I don't think WCA should be used to like rate anything.
Yeah, there you go.
The conditions, like you have people getting knocked out of their playing zones for fucking mobile games. You have people like getting hospitalized. Like, what's going on there? Then like stuff that happened to Leviathan, that shit seemed like a war zone. And I'm just chilling at home, and I'm just thinking to myself, thank God I didn't go there.
Didn't you qualify? Actually,
Oh, we were supposed to go.
yeah.
Yeah, that's why DC got in.
Yeah.
They took our spot.
They sunspent their way into there.
Yeah.
I'm just
Standard.
So I knew this tournament would be issue. Obviously there were a lot of warning signs for this tournament, but the big warning sign for me was that they had 1 million qualifiers, and a lot of those teams ceased to exist by the time the tournament happened, and they were running in like 9 days to the event, 7 days to the event, and they still hadn't announced who would replace the teams that actually qualified. That's a really bad sign.
You know how I knew this tournament was gonna be shit? When they had when they had the fucking NA qualifiers during the majors.
Yeah.
We're at the majors and we were like seeing this happen. We're like, what the fuck's going on? Like, who thought of that? So you end up having these teams like YouPorn and stuff going there. I mean, no offense to them, but there's a lot better teams out there.
Right. They haven't earned it yet. Let's say that. Yeah. I don't know.
I think you're muted, by the way.
Oh yeah, are you trying to talk
I
to
feel
us?
like every time somebody brings up the WCA, it's the sentence is led off with something along the lines of, "No offense to the teams that played, but..."
Because it's not a reflection on the teams that played. That the tournament was not, you know, it's not representative of a real tournament experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like
It's fair.
going to it's not to the same extreme, but it is like to some degree trying to use the Gamers Paradise tournament from earlier this year to tell which teams are going to do well and which aren't. Like, it's not ideal circumstances. It's not the A-class teams. It's huge variation in team skill, theoretically, in terms of like ranking and stuff. The whole thing was a mess in terms of the way that you would measure the metrics for
Right.
has a team done well or not.
Did you guys know that WCA, and I'm not entirely sure, 100% sure how reliable this info is, but I'm going to trust my friend. I'm not going to call out his name because if it's wrong. But he told me that this is actually government funded.
Yeah. It is.
WCA. It's like, what the fuck? I'm sorry for swearing, but like, what the hell? Like, obviously they spend most of their money onto the prize pool because, I mean, they just wanted to have, but it's still kind of crazy. But, you know, just
Government
Chinese.
funded. Do you think they could have gotten some government organization behind it to make it actually run?
I think this may actually have been a good example of Chinese government organization. But I feel like I should give myself a point.
Please. Yeah, I was just about to say, please give yourself points for that. Like,
It was rough. So that said, before we move on, and I do want to talk about some of the general WCA stuff because it was, if you were watching Reddit or anything else this week, there was a lot of talk about what was sort of going on with this whole thing. What are your thoughts? Do you have any additional thoughts on Alliance? I mean, it seems like their new lineup is their old lineup and seems to be gelling very, very well. Do you think bringing back a player that has gone and returned so many times is ultimately detrimental or beneficial?
the way I see it, Toffees, you follow football, right? Soccer,
I
right?
do.
You follow, I mean, there's often times when the player leaves a team and then after like some time comes back, you know, for that romantic reunion, and it's the fans are so in awe because they see their, you know, their player again in that, you know, familiar dress, basically. How often has that been successful?
Right.
And I'm not going to say it's not going to be successful for Lions, but I feel like just by getting EGM back, or like getting the old TI3 roster back, they kind of like not put a lot of pressure onto themselves, but they set the expectations somewhat high, I guess, because as a fan, you'll obviously subconsciously always think that, oh my God, this is like the TI3 roster again. Like they're capable of grand things, right? But ultimately, this team has been struggling, or like most of these players have also been struggling for quite some time. Yes, they've been on the up again. Like S4 did well with Secret, and EGM has been doing awesome with Four Clovers, but.
Right.
There has been a lot of struggle as well with these players. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations, and I think for now they should just try to like stabilize and like aim for like top 8, just get into the top 8 again or something.
Yeah. So one of the issues that I would take with the soccer/football metaphor is that, for the most part, the functional rules of football don't change from year to year. Like, it's not one year the coefficient of friction is X and the next year the coefficient of friction is totally different. But the actual like
I'll give you that.
rules that govern the game of Dota change very drastically. So a team with a very specific playstyle that Alliance did have with this old roster might see tremendous failure on one patch and then tremendous success on another. We've already seen that happen.
MSS did bring up that he thinks that a push strategy may make a return here. So I guess that's always a bold for Alliance anytime that you allow split pushing to be a function.
Yeah, and 685 had a lot of Alliance's key heroes buffed as well, right? And none of those were walked back in 686. So along the side of that, could Alliance be doing well? Yeah, potentially. I don't necessarily know, but I would not necessarily either look to Real Sports for the answer for like trends as to when players leave and come back, how will they perform.
I think that's because you don't really watch Real Sports. That's all the time we got for that topic, so we're going to move past Alliance into a little more of a focus on the WCA in general. I know I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that if you gentlemen are like the vast majority of the fans of Dota out there, you watch WCA from a distance, probably watch some recaps, enjoyed the drama, but didn't so much watch individual games as often as we'd like to. Some interesting things happened that I'm sure you heard about. What do you think? I mean, we're going to roll this together. I'm going to start off this topic with addressing something PPD said. He went on sort of a tirade on YouTube and said these teams shouldn't be complaining. They knew what they were getting themselves into. If you don't like it, don't go. Do you think that is a valid assessment of how you approach a tournament like the WCA?
I mean, I'm not a player, so obviously it's like weird coming from me, but I think that people should do proper research on stuff like this. Like communicate with these people beforehand and ask if certain things are provided from the get-go, and if they're actually, if certain things from the last time are provided as well. Because if I read Eternal Envy's response correctly, apparently a lot of things have changed from last time around. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just a mistake just assuming that everything is going to be the same from last time, maybe even a bit better. No, you always need to communicate with the organizers every time for these things, especially if it's somebody like WCA, or like especially if it's somebody that you don't have like a constant connection with, right? If it's like Beyond the Summit and they have like their summit every two times a year, I feel like you don't have to always communicate with them. Are you gonna have the same chairs again? Are you gonna have the same desks again? If anything, you're gonna ask about practice rooms and stuff like that. But for WCA, like a Chinese organizer, I feel like you should always be in communication with them, try to like make sure that everything is given. That said, I wasn't part of the communication. Maybe they did all of that, and maybe WCA
now,
just
to be clear, just because we've spoken with them, to kind of put this out there for everybody, every example we've heard, they did. So, for instance, I know Team DC called ahead of time and said, we've got some issues with health. We need to have comfortable chairs that are ergonomically sound. And the response from the organization was, DX Racer's a sponsor. We'll have DX Racers for you. When they got there were 20 DX Racer chairs that the security guards were allowed to use, but they were not. Leviathan called and said, we have to practice. We don't have time to look at 6.86 because of our travel arrangements. Will you have practice computers for us? They said, yes, we will absolutely have a place to practice. They got there, and they were told, this practice area is for mobile gamers, not for you to practice on, and they were told not to practice. So from what I understand, most of these teams tried to do their due diligence, and when they got there, it was sort of like, we don't know what's happening. We've got 65 games to run. Sorry, and everybody moved on. So I agree with you, Skim, but I want to be clear that a lot of these teams did try to make those arrangements and were unable to do so.
Does anybody know if WCA is at least expected to pay out all travel expenses?
They are paying travel expenses, yes.
Okay.
It has been
So
confirmed.
I don't see why any team except maybe Secret, which I know Secret dropped out of the summit because of scheduling issues, and then ended up coming to WCA, presumably because they didn't have other events at this period of time. So why not go to an event that they, I assume at the time, would have expected to be basically a free win? A lot of these teams are not teams that have a great deal of potential LAN experience. They don't have a great deal of tournaments clamoring to get them into the LAN, right? I don't see why you would turn down any potential LAN experience if it's not going to cost you money, if your goal is to be a real professional team. Unless you are to the size, obviously, that you can go anywhere. But that's just not true for a lot of these teams, you know? So I definitely sympathize with them. It would be nice if the tournament was professionally hosted, but at the same time, I wouldn't have expected them to turn it down if they don't have better offers on the table.
Arif, do you want to weigh in?
About that, like, even if you have this, like, tournament, like, you qualify for this tournament, if you know that they had these issues last year, which everybody did, like, and, like, you can just tell, like, how the management are just by, like, emailing them. So, like, so we got in through our, like, Summer's Rift, like, they qualified, like, that was Max's old team, and my old team back then was, like, North American Rejects 2, or like, which turned into Archon. So we played that qualifier. We didn't make it through, but we still get paid. And it's been like a year, and we still haven't been paid. And
Really?
we've literally been emailing each other for like past 2 months, and we still haven't been paid. And they keep on asking for bank information. And like, I just know these guys are idiots. Like, it's also like there's just like personal preference. Like, do you want to go to China for X amount of time? Like, it's just all these factors weigh in, and people make a decision based off that.
I've never been there, but it seems like China is one of the few places when we talk about tournaments that do you really want to go to China is something that's actually discussed as impetus to go to these tournaments. Have any of you been there? Is it really that terrible a place that people would consider not playing just because they don't want to go to China?
I don't know, Arif, have you been there?
Yeah, I've never been. I want to. I want to go.
Okay.
So
I've only heard bad things.
Yeah, I've been to WEC last year. It's like a different tournament, basically the same concept. The thing with China is that just a lot of the staff there, or actually most of them, if like not all of them, can't speak English. Not even the basic words. They literally can only say hello and yes, thank you. So you can't really properly communicate with them unless you have like a translator for you there, which is already really difficult because they don't even provide like one translator per team. Like at WEC, they had one translator for everybody. And they not only had Dota, they had Hearthstone, they had StarCraft, they had Warcraft, they had all kinds of shit. So one translator for like 100, 200 people almost is insane actually, right? And it's just, China is just different because they have like the culture is different, obviously. They have like different kinds of like standards. For example, the stage is awesome always. Production is really cool, awesome, most of the time anyway. But then there's like all these like other areas that are just shit because they don't really care for that kind of stuff. Like the practice room at WEC had like chairs that you have in your garden, right? Those plastic white chairs. You have like really poor bathroom conditions because again, it's just China. They don't really care about that stuff, or rather that is like something that really standard there. You have like this hole in the ground that you have to poop in if you want to poop, right? This is the kind of stuff that you kind of, I guess, have to get used to if you want to, you know, work at or be at Chinese events, because this is just China. And then there's obviously like poor communication. Nobody listens to you, and they all have their own idea of what they want to do. And then even the admins themselves don't like the organization inside. In like Chinese people don't organize well. Let's just put it that way. it's crazy to think about that because it's such a large country, but they have like zero organizational skills. And that's just horrible to deal with.
So then let me bring up this last topic for us to talk about the WCA. What a lot of folks don't know or haven't really discussed is that WCA was run by the government, but the organization that sort of put on the whole event is the organization, from what I understand, that owns League of Legends. I think personally that's probably a result as to why we didn't see very much Dota on the main stage. If you guys watched any of the pictures coming out of WCA, fans who traveled to the event and bought tickets for this to watch Dota had to watch it on a monitor the whole time because they were not able to see any sort of games out in front of fans. What does that say about Dota and sort of events in China, I guess? Does that say that it's so big it has to be there even though someone who owns it doesn't want it there? Like, what does that tell us?
I don't know that the people running the tournament didn't want Dota there. I think they probably didn't want to give Dota publicity, and those are two different things.
Fair.
Wanting to have the fans give you views online and have people travel to your event, because Dota is one of the biggest non-League of Legends. It is probably the biggest non-League of Legends esport at all, right? That has ever been. You pretty much have to have it if you want to have a big multi-game LAN, and they realize that is good for them as a business, right? Because you get a whole different slate of viewers. That's totally different from saying, like, I don't want to give this publicity on my main stage. It's probably not great for the fans, but it makes business sense to do that.
Okay. First of all, I mean, I'm not trying to disagree with you or anything, but I kind of am.
Just disagree with me. Be a man, Skim. Say I'm wrong.
There's actually plenty of multi-gaming events or multi-esports events without Dota. IEM is probably one of the biggest brands in esports that doesn't have Dota, right? So I don't think that's necessarily true, especially for China, because if you look at China and if you look at WCA, like how many people actually turned up to watch WCA live on site? Like I've seen pictures from, the crowd trying to watch Alliance. Obviously there were poor watching conditions. Maybe a ton of them or like a few of them already left, but China, or like even looking at DAC, Dota 2 in China is not as big as we would like it to be. And it pales in comparison to League of Legends. So if you have an event where there's like League of Legends and Dota at the same venue, I'm pretty sure League of Legends is going to have like 10 times the live viewers on site.
Definitely in China. Yeah, for sure. No question.
So in that regard, I think that, yes, I mean, obviously it was run very shitty from WCA, but at the same time, they obviously had to put in more money and more like focus on the League of Legends production, which, by the way, was apparently handled separately. I think the League of Legends production, yes, was basically run by whatever, Tencent, whatever, the guys that are going to run LPL next year as well, apparently, but the Dota 2 stuff and everything else was handled differently. So that's maybe why we had like poor Dota 2 conditions.
That makes sense. So like their focus was potentially not on anything but League, and everything else was sort of just conglomeration. Interesting. All right, so that is the time that we have for the WCA talk. So we're going to move on to a new topic at this point. It still has something to do with WCA, but I'm curious to get your opinions on this, and that is how WCA was covered. So when you started tuning in on to watch the games for WCA, you probably found something very strange going on Twitch, and that was that there were two coverage streams for the event, and that's something that we haven't seen in a long time. And that was Join Dota was doing sort of a specific, where the official coverage, your traditional caster, co-caster deal with the coverage WCA, and BTS did sort of a, hey, we're bored, we don't have anything else going on right now, we're going to sit on a couch and talk about what's going on in the WCA. The interesting thing to me is that BTS consistently garnered more views in the head-to-head competition between those two streams. Do you think that's because we're coming off of the summit and it's sort of this casual casting is enjoyable because the event was rough? Like, do you think that has some sort of impetus to how games and tournaments will be covered going forward in the future?
I'll finish this topic in one sentence. People love their memes.
4 points for that one.
It's just simple as that.
Okay.
It's a sad truth.
So you think that it just comes down to it was more fun to sort of listen to that sort of memeing conversation than the actual play-by-play coverage?
I mean, people just like to watch chill streams, like casual stuff. People interact with each other.
So yeah, in entertainment, in like the entertainment industry, and this breaks out of film, but it's true in music, it's true in sports, it's true in everything now. You fans are attracted to an idea of a personality that they can get to know and get to understand and get to like and feel like they are friends with them even though they are not. It's the cornerstone of personality driven entertainment medium. And BTS has done a very good job with that. They have very approachable, very likable personalities. And especially if you can't take the game seriously anyway, because the event is such a mess, of course you're going to go to the place that has the memes, that has an entertainment factor beyond the game. That doesn't surprise me at all. I don't know that means that's how events will be covered in the future, because a series event people care about the analyst desk and stuff, I think, a little bit more than they would at an event like this.
Interesting. So do you guys, in your opinion, think that this is sort of you made a good point, sort of our love of memes, that this is a one-off, once in a while, this will sort of be really great, but consistently the audience will prefer to see traditional style casting? Or do you think this is a signal that we may start to see these casual couch casts just as often as we see the traditional style of casting?
I think we have to keep it not balanced, but like we have to make sure that it's not like actually just as often as like the professional casting, because then it kind of becomes old, right? Like it was so entertaining, it was so fun to watch because it was just like once in like every 3 months or so. That's why the summit is great, because you have it twice a year or something, which is awesome. But imagine if you had it like every weekend, it would become old. The casters especially would also not really enjoy it as much, because at some point it would become forced, right? So I think this is really just, if you have it like once every 6 months or so, it's fine. But more often than that, and just like, it's too exhausting.
Casual is good as long as it remains casual, but if you're doing it all the time, then it feels like the job, right? And then it's no longer casual. You ruin the total effect.
Okay, I gotcha. So then we'll close this topic with this. Arif, do you prefer meme casts or the good old-fashioned kind, or do you just generally turn off everybody and just listen, not listen to the commentary at all?
There's only a certain amount of casters I actually listen to. Carlo Guy being one, but I don't know. I think meme casts should be just a once in a while thing.
Okay.
Should be very rare, to be honest.
I could not agree more, but I'll leave it at that and say, hey, the community loves what the community loves, and who are we to say otherwise? That said, let me ask you this, and this is just an opinion piece because I actually just thought of this. Do you think that is, I don't want to say kosher, cool, okay? Do you think that maybe BTS stepped on JD's toes, or do you think it's sort of like a, hey, free market, do your thing? Or JD has a right to be mad about this sort of thing?
They actually got official broadcasting rights from WC. Yeah.
Even if they didn't.
And even if they didn't,
they're competitors, right? Yeah. There's the Dota terms of service allow you to stream stuff off the game. So as long as they're just doing it off of ticket, I see no reason why they shouldn't be allowed to do that, even though I have literally had broadcasted and had my broadcasts undermined that way by other broadcasters. It doesn't. It's the way that Dota as an ecosystem has been set up by Valve. If your competitor is doing that, you have to be putting out a product that's worth watching.
To each their own, I guess. And this is the first time we've seen them butt up against each other in a very long time. So if for no other reason, I found it fascinating to sort of, I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't even watch the streams that much. I just kept Twitch open to see what the viewership numbers were for each studio out of morbid curiosity, if that makes sense. So that is our talk about JD versus BTS. Go ahead. Just quickly.
I'm actually really sad that BTS got official broadcasting rights, because this scene needs more castle drama.
It does need more drama.
It needs more casting drama.
More casting drama. You might get that out of the Mafia land. Let's talk about
okay.
the next topic I want to talk about very quickly is Shanghai Majors. They are coming up. The open qualifiers, I think, are I'm bad with dates. Is it a week out, a week and a half out from now?
Something like that.
Something
I don't
like
have the
that.
exact date.
So that means that the invites are right around the corner. Who are you looking forward to seeing invited, and how do you think that those invites should be determined regarding the majors?
There's been a big discussion about this on Twitter, and I just want to basically give a shout out to Nahaz and Sun Tzu, who've done a really good job at like breaking stuff down. And as Sun Tzu, I think, pointed out, I think MSS also pointed out earlier, but we shouldn't use WCA as
for sure.
like a reference for these invites. Honestly, I mean, it's still nice to see like this few teams performing there, but obviously, just based on the conditions and the fact that it's like a new patch, it's just awful. So let's not use WCA for that. Other than that, I think actually that almost all of the top 8 from the Frankfurt Major are top 8 still, sort of, if I had to make an invite. I think 7 of those 8 teams definitely. I think LGD is a team that people have pointed out to be one of the teams that don't necessarily have to be invited back again. And I kind of agree, because back in the Frankfurt Major I already thought they weren't as strong. But other than that, I still think that the top 8 would technically be still valid. You could argue for like Liquid or maybe even Alliance, but yeah.
Even if they're not the CSGO model that this appears to be basically on, other than we have the international in addition to 3 majors, right? I'm pretty sure that their model is top 8 teams get invited to the next time. And then 8 more teams are invited to challenge those teams based on performance over the course of the previous couple of months. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the model for Dota, but I don't have any problem with top 8 teams always re-invited if they don't have significant roster changes. I see no issue with that. And it helps create that narrative that you always know who's going to be coming. And it also encourages teams that are doing well to kind of stay together between at least 2 majors so fans can become attached to franchises.
Interesting. Okay. So it sounds like general opinion is just because Alliance won an incredibly large prize pool in a very large tournament, they should not be invited directly to this without some sort of other performance issue. I mean, does this mean they don't get a direct invite?
I mean, I think if you just compare it to the other teams that placed top 8 at the Frankfurt Major, they shouldn't be invited.
Okay.
If you just compare them to the other teams.
Yeah.
Tough.
I just don't think that they've earned it yet. Not off of that event. They haven't really done anything else, right? Since the Frankfurt Major of any significance. So.
Got to earn that spot. Okay. What teams do you think have sort of emerged since Frankfurt Major? Has anybody sort of come to mind that you think, man, I think that they could do very well in Shanghai and may surprise everybody?
Well, yeah, for sure. I think, Liquid, I think has shown the biggest improvement, I guess, so far. I mean, even before the Frankfurt Major, obviously, Liquid was a really strong contender to be not necessarily directly invited, but to make it through the qualifiers. They just had like a really off performance during the playoffs of the qualifier, which was, I guess, too bad. But ever since then, ever since the Frankfurt Major, they've been really strong. So I think Liquid is really strong contender to be, again, in the qualifier, potentially be an invite. But so I think outside of Liquid, there's not really a strong contender right now, especially since Team Empire is, I don't know. What's Team Empire really?
What is Team Empire really? Nice.
I think Empire, I think they've done well. I think that they could do very well moving in. I'm not necessarily top 8, but making it through qualifiers to top 16, possibly. I agree with Liquid, though I don't think Liquid has ever achieved the level of success that they had 2 weeks after they started playing together. Right around the time that they branded Liquid, they were killing it in Europe. They were going toe-to-toe with then Monkey Business, then Vegas Squadron. They have not recaptured that in 686 as far as I have seen, but they are on an upswing as well. I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, didn't they win like the defense like a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, something like that. I'm not sure that was the defense
Against OG.
Yeah, it was against
OG
OG.
too.
Yeah.
Yep, that was a solid win. So I think they're looking good, but I think obviously 6.86 makes it tough to sort of see who's going to be ready and who's not at this point for Shanghai. Do you guys have any other thoughts on the Shanghai Major and what you hope to see out of it before we move on to the last topic? All right. Sounds about right. So we'll buzz that and move to the next one. And this is one that I think is a little bit less about the Dota 2 scene and maybe a little more about esports in general and sort of the functionality there. And what we saw is there was a big thing, if you follow other esports, about salaries and revelation. And basically what happened in League of Legends, there's a team called Ember, and they talked about, so they released sort of their manifesto of what they believe makes a great team. And one of the things they said they believe in is transparency. And in doing that, they released the base salaries, the bonuses, and the total compensation for every single team or every single member of their roster. And they said other sports do this. If someone signs to an NBA team, every fan immediately knows what they make. Every other NBA player knows what they make. This helps fairness in the market and allows people to sort of know that they're not getting screwed over and that they're being taken care of. What are your thoughts on salary transparency within specifically Dota 2?
How do you feel about this, MSS? Because you're the one that plays and would have your income published, right? That's different if it's your money that's coming to you. Do you think it'd be good?
I mean, it's probably going to be. It would be good, like for the most part, because just having transparency between companies and players and to the community is always going to be a good thing. Like, I want to refer back to when OG, like before they signed with them, they were a lot of Reddit were flaming them because No-Tail wanted transparency between them and the company, even though that should be standard by now, to be honest.
Right.
And Reddit is just completely flaming that's a horrible idea. Why would anyone want to show how much you're making to your players? But you should be showing your players how much you're making, with your sponsors and stuff. And I guess showing salaries to the public is kind of a step towards that.
I think it's more showing salaries. Like, the public has to have this information in order to make sure to know that other teams and players know that information, so that you can evaluate, are you being given the proper value relative to your peers, right?
Are you being treated the same way as other?
Right.
So, and to spin off of that, let me ask you this, Arif. As you have gone through the process of probably talking to sponsors, negotiating this sort of stuff, how do you go about, I mean, is it hard currently to negotiate a deal with a sponsor in terms of salary and pay and prize pool cuts because there's not a lot of information out there? Or do you think does it help or hurt you that there's not a ton floating around?
I mean, of course it'll hurt us if we don't have a lot of information, but I think it's gotten to a point where a lot of companies know what's pretty standard, like what's standard nowadays, like standard salaries and benefits you should be giving your players. But then again, I'm usually not part of the negotiations when it comes to my team. I usually have someone doing that for us.
Now, do you usually have a player from the team or a manager from the team do it, or is there a third party group that sort of takes care of that for players nowadays?
It's usually either a person you can trust a lot or a player on your team who has a lot of experience doing this.
Okay. And I think that some of the discussion that came out around the salary revelation thing was that revealing just salaries isn't okay, because you could say give a great salary and no benefits, and allow to roof a salary higher, and that can sort of throw off everyone else's negotiation system. That seems contrived to me. It sounds like a lot of players want transparency. They want to say, I want to know what my value is. I mean, when we talk about the NFL, for instance, every time that a quarterback's contract comes up, they basically look at a list of quarterbacks who are comparable to them in terms of performance, and they say, that's what quarterback X makes. I believe that I should be making the same amount when they go to their contract negotiation. Is that something that needs to be provided for Dota players as we develop the scene? Should MSS, should you be able to look at a comparable player to yourself and say, this guy's making this much, why are you trying to pay me so little?
So I don't want to take away from the discussion of this, because it's important that something in terms of player rights and ability to represent themselves fairly is done. But I will say that League of Legends and Dota are completely different ecosystems, right? League of Legends is very heavily monitored by Riot. It's a league system. There are buy-ins for the type. It's much closer to something like the NFL. Whereas Dota is sort of a conglomeration of completely independent organizations that run tournaments on their own. And it's difficult to compare the two in the way that players are paid or not paid, or how they fit into the overall like economic system of the game. What I will say is that I am sympathetic to the idea that it's not enough to show salaries. If you're going to do something like this, then probably entire contracts need to be revealed, similar to how they're done in most traditional sports.
Right.
Because there are a lot of aspects to contracts, as MSS I'm sure would be able to vouch, that are not how much you're getting paid.
Like honestly, it doesn't matter if I know what salary someone else is getting, because they could be getting like 10K more salary than me, but they might be like having a 30% prize cut or something.
Right.
And I could be having a 0% prize cut with like 15,000 less salary than him. I'll fucking take that anytime. Like, it's just these things that you don't show. Like, these are very big factors.
You might not have any requirements for publicity.
Like streaming.
And another player might be required to do 30 hours of publicity with press and fans for every major event they do. Like, those are big factors for what your job is. Because as a player, you're like an athlete, and an athlete is a type of entertainer, right? An athlete is more than a competitor. They are entertainers, and part of that job with sponsorships typically is representing the brand. And so I think people outside of people that don't come in from an entertainment background don't consider the fact that there are other responsibilities and other reasons that sponsors come to players than simply we want the name on the jersey, right? They usually want more than that.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What, in your opinions, is the next most important step for Dota 2? And like you said, comparing League to Dota, I don't want to do that. We want to stick on Dota specifically. What's the next thing that we need to see to sort of take that next move? Is it transparency in salaries? Is it contract transparency? Is it agents who specialize in negotiating these things to represent players? Is it individual player managers? What do you think the next step is towards true legitimacy and growing as Dota 2?
Legitimate press.
Well,
that's
screw
my answer.
You. No.
I go ahead. Whoever else has a different answer.
In my opinion, like, I don't care if someone knows my salary or anything like that. I think the players in general should know what their company, like their organization, like where they're making their money from, and how much they're making from each sponsor, and transparency, pretty much transparency between the player and the organization.
Okay.
That should be a standard thing for every player.
All right. So
and then we can share our salaries and prize cards and whatever. But before, you need to know that you need to have transparency.
I like that.
I see it as so difficult to go from where you are now to that without a middle ground of third-party interests who are going in and doing actual reporting about what's happening. Like, that's where that comes from in traditional sports, right? You didn't have salary negotiations that were public, and then sports press like ESPN and the sports pages at the various newspapers that covered it showed interest and delivered that information to fans because there was a market for it. And now it's completely transparent. And granted, there are a lot of other complicating factors there, but press is a really important part. Engaging with press and being willing to engage with press as a team is a really important part of getting information that's important to you to the public. And what gets to the public is an important part of getting information, getting sponsors to care about that information because they care about their image.
Right.
And the public cares about what is happening. So you need that middleman, that press, to bring that information out in a widespread, readable or watchable, reliable, and trustworthy way. And right now we have some of that. I think, for example, Toffees, I think you do a good job. I think I do an okay job when I do that kind of coverage, right? But that's not in majority of the type of coverage that I do. It's not a majority of the type of coverage any Dota press I know does, right? And we need people who specialize in that. And we need them to be able to work on it and get it out to the public in a way that the public actually cares
So
about.
I assume, Skim, that you have a similar feeling about the need to sort of bridge the gap between press and players, teams, if you will. Arif, as someone who's not on the press side, because obviously Gorgon's a writer, Skim's been a writer and sort of does community bait, reach out. I obviously am interested in sort of doing media stuff. As a player, does the player community see the value or a value in sort of press relationships, appearances, things like that? Or is that something that doesn't hold a huge value to the pro scene at the moment?
I don't think anybody cares, to be honest.
Okay.
Wait, what do you mean, like, it's like interviews and
Yeah,
stuff?
so for instance, when you talk about traditional sports, a lot of contracts require that you speak to press periodically, that you be willing to do interviews, that you put your personality, your persona out there to represent the brand that hired you. And that's why, say, if you get caught for fighting dogs, you have a hard time getting hired by another NFL team because it doesn't fit their look. That doesn't seem to happen in esports. And do you think that that's something that's on the way, or do players just not really see a value to that at the moment?
I don't think that's ever going to happen, to be honest. I think like 7 out of 10 players would not want to do an interview, like, ever.
Yeah. No, it's true, because it's really hard.
People don't like doing interviews.
So I think we can say 9 out of 10.
I can say
9 out. I was trying to be generous.
Yeah,
the culture of esports, though, right? Like, guys like us who are really into esports at this generation tend to be guys who spend a lot of time alone, online, on the computer, right? A lot of introverts are into esports at this age group. I don't know that that's going to be true in a generation, right? Because computer gaming is much more prevalent. So maybe that has something to do with it. In addition to that, a lot of people who get into esports are really young. They're in their teens. They don't necessarily have the same college background that a professional athlete has. And so it's really difficult to leverage in their minds the benefit that doing an interview does and building a personal brand does. But I guarantee you, Kobe Bryant makes more money because he is a well-known individual and people like to follow him from advertisements than he would just being a good basketball player. Like, it is in players' interests to engage in these activities. It's just really hard for them to justify because they don't have it's uncomfortable. They don't necessarily have a press venue that they can go to and feel like they trust. It's a time sink, and it doesn't lead to immediate gains. So it's hard to justify, and I understand that for sure.
And
I just want to
go ahead.
I just want to pick up on something that Matt and a few others pointed out in chat. Is that, like, why would I, as a player, want to do an interview with, say, Ghost Gamers or Join Dota if my personal brand is bigger than theirs?
That's true.
Like, what kind of value do they have from spending 10 to maybe even 30 minutes in an interview with that's going to get, like, what, 1,000 views or something, or like 10,000 at most in most cases? So what kind of value do they get out of that? And
I peak well over 10,000 when I draw an interview on Join Dota. I can't give exact numbers, but I usually do better than that. Like, I would like to think that I have more reach on.
I was mostly talking about video interviews, but it's still like a question of, like, what do they get out of that? Do they get, like, an immediate return out of that? Right.
No.
Nah. And
makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And quite frankly, most of these. I'm sorry to keep on, but most of these people that do these interviews are not even good at their job. Like, a lot of people, not most of them, but a lot of people are. I've seen, for example, at the Frankfurt Major, a few interviews from, like, if this person ever gets an interview ever again, I'm gonna shit my pants because that's awful. And it's just stuff like that where players just, like, if you get these interviews in a while, obviously at some point you're just going to be like, oh yeah, I got enough. I'm only doing interviews with, like, Hotbed, somebody I know, where I know that, you get, like, a quality interview out of it, and you have, like, a big reach, and it actually helps your brand by doing an interview with him, for example.
And I'm gonna, I can call soapbox. I was gonna say I'm gonna soapbox a little bit on this point, but
all
I
right,
can actually.
let's do it. Hold on. So let me set the clock. You get 1 minute. You can say anything you want. Ready, and time is yours.
Okay, so if I'm a player and I'm a young guy who is generally, not always, but generally introverted, I don't have a lot of experience being press savvy or working with the press, finding somebody that I trust is difficult. And then more importantly, understanding what the press gives me that I don't already natively get from my reach is also difficult to see. And I think a lot of press approach that from the wrong way. They put unedited videos up for the easiest possible way to get information out there for fans. But what you really bring as press is that you can provide context, you can provide the background, you can provide an experienced perspective to help a player mold what they want to say better than they're able to do in real time, which is why I like to do almost all my interviews in text and audio so that I can actually work with the player, figure out what they want to say, and give them the means to say that, as opposed to simply asking them a bunch of questions, live fire, on video, and then holding them to that answer and putting it up online without any ability to clarify what they might be thinking in real time, which is not their specialty, right?
I think that makes good sense. I think that makes great sense. So time to rethink the interview formats. But no, I think that's some good points. I think the discussion about the fact that honestly interviews don't benefit, especially large brand players. Charlie brought it up in chat, as well as Jimmy and some other folks, that listen, if you're on a big team or you're a big name and everyone follows you on Twitter and knows you, what's the point of doing a 10,000 view interview? If you're a team like Leviathan who's trying to break into the scene, of course, it makes sense. I think it sort of just depends on the situation. Unfortunately, do you think that that's going to make it harder to get legitimate press to develop within the scene because they can't really secure the things to give them legitimacy? Does that make sense? How do you gain legitimacy if you can't get that interview?
You work really, really hard and hope that players give you chances and earn those chances every opportunity you get. Right? Like at MSS, if I'm approaching you as an interviewer, right, what would maybe make you think about accepting it if you don't already know who I am, if I'm not a hotbed? It's tough, right?
Yeah, it kind of is, but I want to go back to why players don't like to take interviews. Like, everyone's saying that it's just like it doesn't benefit them, or like why would you take an interview to like an interviewer that gets like 10,000 views only or something like that? But like it's kind of that. But I think the bigger reason, or like one of the big reasons too, is like all these interviewers like ask them shittiest questions too.
That's so true.
Like honestly, that's why everybody accepts Hotbit interviews, because his questions are good. Like same with I think Slacks too, but there's just not a lot of interviews nowadays that ask the good questions. Pretty much, that's my opinion though.
So I don't necessarily know that I would say that people ask bad questions. I would say they ask the same questions. Interviewers rarely come in with informed statistics or something behind their interview. So what's really nice about Hotbid is that he asks very personal questions, and he has a personal rapport with most of the players he interviews, at least somewhat. And so he gets like a behind the scenes of that player, and he doesn't focus very heavily on the games. And same for Slacks. He goes for a funny interview that's fun to engage in. And then the rest of interviewers typically ask like, what do you feel about that game you played, rather than asking broader questions about the career or something like that. And I would agree with that. And it's hard to make those questions, to be fair, to interviewers. But at the same time, I totally see where you're coming from, MSS.
All right, guys, that is all of the time that we have for scheduled topics. So what we're going to do right now, and we did this last week, and I thought it was a lot of fun. I didn't warn the players about it last time, so I didn't do it this time either, is we're going to have a very fast lightning round. What the lightning round means is we're going to do 30 seconds. So think about it now. You talk about whatever you want. You can address something that we've already talked about, any topic that sort of catches your interest, and that's a last chance effort to sort of gain those points. Right now, MSS is in the lead with 38. We've got Skim right behind him at 35 and Ryan at 34. So there's something that was on your mind throughout the show today, and if you don't want to spend that time talking about some topic, you can use it for anything else you want. Talk to chat, maybe throw a few shout outs. But this is your 30 seconds to try and secure the win for yourself. We'll start with Skim and work our way down the line. Skim, your 30 seconds starts right now.
All right. WCA is shit. Chinese unfortunately don't care about Dota as much anymore, which is a shame because the Chinese Dota scene is awesome. But maybe in the future with like I think the majors in DAC and stuff like that is a really good opportunity to get Dota bigger there. And one last thing I want to talk about is Town needs qualifiers for the next tournament. That's it.
Qualifiers for Mafia. That is a good use of the 30 seconds if I ever heard it. Hopefully they cast it next year too. I'd love to see a caster. Just it'd be hilarious to have like 2 townspeople walking around casting the whole thing. All right, MSS, you've got 30 seconds to say whatever you want. Try to get a few extra points. Your time starts now.
WCA shit. Memes are king. Chinese conspiracy to make League of Legends better. And Mafia Land coming up. That's pretty much it. I don't know, dude. WCA shit. Like that's it.
I think I'm giving you points for WCA. I'm gonna take one away for basically repeating everything Skim said. And
I don't know what else to say, man.
I respect that. All right, time is up. Last one up. Gorgon, you've got 30 seconds on the clock. Go.
Toffee seemed a little bit confused by my flow of the jungle argument when we were talking about 686. So if you are interested in more about that, you can swing over to Dota Blast, where I have an article and pictures outlining my argument there. I'm interested to see how 686 works out, and I should be doing something on Invoker and some of the other heroes, statistical analysis, coming up later this week. So if you're interested in 686 heroes, follow me on Twitter, and I will have that out later this week.
Can I still have a soapbox? By the way?
Yeah, if you want soapbox, go ahead.
Okay.
So this is his 1 minute soapbox. I thought you might save it to the end. Classic Skim play here. You got 1 minute on the clock. Go ahead.
Okay, just want to point out how Gorgon just used the 30 seconds to be the biggest sellout I've seen since.
I know, right?
Like, what the fuck? Like, seriously. Like, how do you sell out that hard? But anyway, actually, that's actually basically all I wanted to say. Gorgon, you're a fucking sellout.
Oh,
Follow me at Skim Gaming.
The entire time Gorgon was going on, I was like, this guy's the biggest sellout.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like plugging his Twitter and shit. I was like, why didn't I do that?
It's all up here.
Yeah, you know, when I first met Gorgon, he wasn't a sellout, and I think I made him that way. That said, though, guys, that's the time for the game. Let's look at the scores, and it is, oh my goodness, is it really tied? It is. It's 40-40. So Skim's little soapbox calling Gorgon a sellout. I handed him 2 points because I thought it was an awesome suggestion. I actually tied him with MSS. Ryan, you are completely out of this one, so you will not be competing in the next round. That said, let's figure out who gets the big win, and we'll do that, let's say, who has the highest MMR?
Come on, this is not even fair.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, MSS, but you can't compete with my 9K Reddit MMR.
Golf rules, lowest is best.
I mean,
Lowest is best. No, I don't really have a tiebreaker age. It's the first time we've had that happen.
I'm cool to give the win to MSS. Like, it's the first time he's gonna win anything anyway. So.
Okay.
I should give you the win for that quality shot.
I heard.
That's stuff. We'll have MSS.
I mean, I'm looking at that Cloud9 share, and all I can think about is how he's going to end up second place anyway in this debate. So.
Brutal.
Oh, just give him the win, man. He's just destroying me right now.
I think
I'm raising the white flag.
I think I have to do that. I think I've got to give it to Skim for like that was brutal. So Skim, you take the win. The Aegis is yours. In your contrived pretend to sacrifice to a friend, you ultimately won the battle. So that means you get 1 minute to talk about anything you want. I know you just took a soapbox, but find something else, I guess, or just be a sellout. It's your choice. You've got 1 minute starting right now.
Actually, I want to give a quick shout out to Matt Demers, who used to work for The Score. I actually enjoy a lot of his work recently that he's been doing, and he's going to do like a live blog for The Town, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, Mafia Land is going to be fun anyway, but if you can't check it out The Town. I think just mattdemers.com or whatever, but yeah. He's been doing a really good job, and in general, just a really good job to all those people, a well done, guys, to all the people that work behind the scenes. I mean, there's a lot of like admins, there's like, database guys that, run the stuff on Ghost Gamers, Join Dota, or whatever, that you don't really get to know, that you don't really see a name from them, right? So just a big shout out to those guys because they've been keeping the lights on basically. So.
All right. I think that was a good wrap up there, guys. I appreciate you coming on. Let's do one last chance. If you want to, I want you to give out where can these folks find you, and a shout out to anybody who you feel deserves a shout out. Skim, where can these folks find you online?
You can follow me on Twitter at Skim Gaming. That's pretty much it. Actually, you can also follow me on DotaBuff.
Oh, there you go. Because he works there.
Yeah.
Arif, any shout outs, and where can they find you?
You can follow me on Twitter at MSS Dota. Same on Twitch. And shout out to Grand.
It happens all the time. All right, big Ryan, what's your closing shot?
I'm just going to give a shout out to Skim for Tanya Harding kneecapping the both of us for the win. That was beautiful. That was perfectly executed. And I already said what you can find on my Twitter at the Wonder Cow. So if you care.
All right, guys, you can find me at ToffeesTV. Of course, if you want to check it out on Twitter. A big shout out to Pro Built Systems, Razer, and Asus for making this show possible. And, of course, to you guys, Skim, Arif, and Ryan for coming on the show. Couldn't have done it without you, so I appreciate you sacrificing your evening. Big congratulations to Skim for taking home the Aegis. We look forward to having you back. And, of course, MSS and Ryan, anytime that you're interested, send me a message. We'll see if we can't get you onto the show whenever you like. And it looks like Gorgon brought us a dog for the end of the match, so hey, dog.
His name is Rexar.
Rexar. Nice. So that's it, guys. That's all we have for tonight. Have a wonderful evening. Hopefully, maybe your Christmas break will extend through Monday like mine is. Play some Dota. Have a good time with it. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, Toffees out.